Hey everybody! Thank you so much for joining. We're doing a new format. We're going to be broadcasting on Facebook on a few different channels, as well as YouTube and a few different channels. We wanted to get as many people involved and reach as many people as possible. You guys can comment, and if you comment and communicate with us, we'll see it on our end as well. So if it's a question that you have with regards to any of the topics that we're going to be discussing, feel free to throw it into your comment on any platform that you're viewing us on, whether it's YouTube or Facebook. And if it's pertaining to what we're talking about, we'll mastermind. I'll put the comment on the screen. We'll answer or address any questions that you might have. So it's all going to be good stuff. But wanted to get started first with some just information on, let's see here, I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me 1 second here. Birthdays, these individuals, these wonderful agents at KW have a birthday this month. If you see them around, please wish them a happy birthday. Numbers for KWRI, we had an amazing month. Actually, we had an amazing 2020, but it continues into 2021, which is fantastic. December stats for our local market center are here as well. You can take a look at that. By the way, all these things you can look back as well and pause it. Again, it's going to be recorded on all these different platforms, so it'll be very helpful for you for future use. We are in tax season, and I just wanted to give a couple of tidbits. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention some of this stuff. But I have been using RealtyZam for a long time for my accounting to keep track of receipts and my P&Ls and so forth. RealtyZam has given us the benefit of a referral code. Let me see if I can find it real quick here. And Carrie, if you can find it before I can find it, by all means, please throw it up there. Here it is. Thank you. Perfect. If you go to RealtyZam and you sign up and you enter that referral code, they'll give you a discount on your purchase. But it's phenomenal. They have an application that you can use. You can screenshot your receipts. It logs it automatically into the system. You can automatically connect your credit cards, your bank statements, and everything to it to create easier P&Ls. It can categorize everything for you. And it can go so far as, and I've done this before, which is actually amazing. It can go so far as you almost like look at each transaction as how profitable you are, not only for the buy side or list side, but for that transaction specifically. And so I've done that before, and it's been super helpful. So you can go real deep with that if you wanted to. It's really helpful information. Again, on that same topic of taxes, as we approach tax year, MileIQ is a great one to use to log all of your drive, and it'll automatically do it. It uses GPS to do it. So if you are going to somewhere frequently, it'll ask you, is this one that you just want to automatically set up as your normal commute from home to the office, or is this to a client? So you can set all those different things up. I would highly recommend those little tools for you. And let's get started. So I'm going to play this video for you guys. Guys, family reunion is coming up. We will be making sure that we have, let's see here, we got the banners for family reunion going on. So make sure if you haven't already registered for family reunion, please let us know. You can do so at the website address that's scrolling on the screen. But if you have a referral and you want somebody to invite, as you know, we come from contribution. So if there's a wonderful agent that you want to invite to family reunion, please do so. I think they estimate anywhere between 65 to 80,000 people in attendance this year, which is absolutely bananas. It is by far and away the largest event for KW. So by all means, please log on and check it out, and call us if you have any, or ask me any questions that you might have with regards to that event. Going back to the screen here, family reunions coming up. As I mentioned before, there's some breakouts that have already been published. So if you have already registered, please, check out what breakouts that there are available, and plan your path, because I don't know if anyone here has attended Family Reunion Live, which would have been last year. It gets a little bit confusing because there's so many different content and wonderful things to attend, and you want to be everywhere at one time. Well, obviously there's classes going on all at the same time. So look at the breakout, plan your route. If you're looking to enhance your skills as a buyer's agent, then plan your breakouts and your classes accordingly. If you're looking to enhance your skill set on scripting, then plan that accordingly, and so forth. So take a look at the Family Reunion website. The website address is scrolling on the bottom there. More platforms, so they're going to have a lot more interactivity, a lot more breakout, a lot more kind of game show formatting. It's going to be fun. Take a look at it. And I'm going to show you this because this is pretty cool. Let's see if this video will play for us here.
Hello, Keller Williams. My name is Jason Abrams. I am your VP of Industry, and welcome to the first annual Keller Williams Mega Camp Script Challenge. What you say that helps move people in action faster with you than without you is often what separates successful realtors from everybody else. Now, everybody you're going to see today at the Script Off Challenge are absolute script masters. They have years and years of practicing, role-playing, writing scripts, rehearsing scripts, and most importantly, relating to people. Remember, it's not just what words we say, it is how we say them. And today you are going to choose who says them best. We have come down to this. This is the finals. We are going to watch Nick Waltner and Anna Kalinsky, both of them battle-tested, coming up through the ranks, and a winner goes on NC2A style tournament. Both absolute winners, both script Jedi, no losers here today. This is going to be the final, and there can be only one. Nick, you're going first. And let's see what we got here. Oh, Nick, story of your life. Okay, you ready?
Let's go.
I have a friend in the business. They just got their license, but they're a really good friend of mine. I think I have to do business with them.
Jason, I can appreciate that. And in all honesty, there are a lot of real estate agents out there. Now, let me ask you a quick question. The home you're selling, is that your largest financial asset to date?
Yes.
And does it matter that you're doing someone a favor or maximizing the most amount of money possible so that you can provide for your family and help you with the next house?
That's true, but I mean, you're just going to put it on the MLS. I mean, they are a good friend of mine.
And I appreciate that. And there's so much more to the MLS than just posting it. So what I'd like to suggest is, what if I partnered with your friend and I gave them an inside access to everything we do to sell over 400 homes a year at 100.6% of list to sale price in 36 days faster. So you sell for more, faster, and your friend gets an education they'll learn for the rest of their life.
Break script. That's fantastic. Again, I don't want to point anyone in any directions. Nick, I love it. You're simply trying to educate my friend, and so you get the listing. Well done. Anna, look, I think you're great. I want to do business, but my friend just got their license. I think I should probably list with him.
You know what, Jason? I totally appreciate that. And can we make the agreement that everybody is a real estate agent these days? It's kind of crazy. So let me ask you, what's more important to you? That you make your friend feel good, or that you make the best financial decision for your well-being? Can you imagine what's going to happen to your friendship if something goes wrong? It's going to be really awkward, right? Imagine if you had to have surgery. Would you want your new friend to cut you open, or would you want the doctor with the best track record? You see? This is just like that, except this is financial surgery.
Nick, you're awesome. Anna, you're the champion. Yes! Wow, Script Master 2020. Congratulations. You went through an amazing field of awesome competitors.
That was crazy.
Guys, that was awesome. That was some of the scripting that they do. So they had a script challenge at Mega Camp. That was just a snapshot of the finals. They're going to be more scripting. And I got to tell you too, so all the agents that are watching, especially the ones locally here in Hawaii, everywhere, of course, but especially in Hawaii, that's one of the biggest objection handlers that I've always heard is, hey, how do I combat the fact that everyone has their cousin is an agent, or their uncle's an agent, or their friend's an agent. That's a great one. So you had two that you could see that was unbelievable. And I think that's great stuff. So hopefully, and it's recorded, so go back and take a look at it again. But we do that kind of stuff, script practicing at KW all the time. So please jump on some of that stuff. So without further ado, let me remove a couple of things here. Bear with me one sec. And I'm going to introduce someone who really needs no introduction, Mr. Tony Pates. Tony.
Hey, Chad.
I love bragging about you. How long have you been in this in our industry, our amazing industry?
I got licensed in 1985, got my broker's license in 87, jumped on my own from 81 to 2001, had a small brokerage company until 2013 before coming to KW.
And for all of you who don't know, I wasn't born in 1985. So you've been licensed prior to me being in existence. So don't do the math. Just put your.
They had a new age rule back then, right? They've changed that. Now you have to be like 18 or 21.
That's right. So Tony, we are very fortunate. We love doing this class, and for those who are seeing it for the first time, Tony and I have been doing a class. We do tons of different classes. We've been doing this one specifically for well over a year, actually, maybe a year and a half now. We've gotten great feedback. This is the class that we have requested most often. And one of the things that I would tell everyone is don't memorize the things to put on a purchase contract. The whole point in this class and why we teach it in the way we teach it is you have to be really understanding of the market of the moment. An example of that, and we'll get into some of this as we go deeper, but an example of that is an escalation clause, something that would probably be frequently used maybe a year and a half ago or so, doesn't have the same impact now as it did then. Whereas an appraisal clause didn't have that much of an impact a year and a half ago, whereas it absolutely is more impactful now. So having a real understanding of the market of the moment and when to use certain things and how, if you write down or insert one clause into the contract or use certain number of dates or whatever, how it impacts your client versus how it'll impact the other side. Would you agree with that, Tony?
Absolutely. Contracts are changing all the time. The market changes all the time.
Yeah, and words matter. I mean, if you use the difference of shall or may legally, that has an absolute different outcome for you. Jen Andrews, our new PB, is going to be putting a class out on the anatomy of the purchase contract. So she's going to break down the purchase contract much more than this is. This is a more of a higher level understanding on how to negotiate the contract and when to use certain things. So just be open-minded and let's go through that process together. So what is today's goal? We're going to have a better understanding of the purchase contract, some tips and tricks, how to stay out of trouble. We'll give you some resources. Take notes. And this is the one thing I laugh at. We are all professionals. A lot of real estate agents, both in Keller Williams and outside of Keller Williams, will call their BIC and they'll say, hey, can you just give me the wording for this? Or could you just fill this out? Guys, you are licensed for a reason. You're the professional. Please take responsibility in understanding and getting a good grasp on the purchase contract and understanding what's at stake. I tell this to new agents all the time. When you're licensed, it's great. Everyone kind of high fives. Hey, I got my license. Hey, Tony, I just passed my license, my broker's license. Woohoo! But at the end of the day, one thing to bear in mind is you now have a target on your back. The you being licensed is really a way for the state to know exactly who you are, where you are, so they can send you a fine. You're held to a higher standard than anyone else would, especially in with regards to real estate. So make sure that you take that seriously. Take notes, learn, grow. So let's dive in real quick. So a tip, here's an easy tip, and it sounds super simple, but I tell you right now that this is really important. Before you write an offer, call the listing agent and just ask, do you have any offers in hand? If so, how many, how strong are they? When are you presenting offers to the seller? That's important, right? Because if you're going to be writing an offer and they're going to present in an hour, you might not have enough time to even get that offer submitted. Whereas, and this happens in Hawaii all the time, the seller might be in a different state, maybe in a different time zone. So you want to write the offer with the right expectations that you're going to deliver to the buyers to when that offer is going to expire. This is, to me, one of the most important questions is, besides price, what's important to the seller? And the reason why that's important too is I've had offers accepted because, again, besides price, because the pricing part of it is something that you're going to deal directly with the buyer, what they could afford, what they feel the property is worth, you consulting them and looking at comps and so forth. But this one is important because what if people just kind of assume that I'm going to write the highest price offer with the shortest amount of close time. But what if the seller is relocating and needs a 90-day escrow, or they might need a rent back, or they might need a certain credit, or there's other factors involved. Well, if those things are okay with your buyer, why wouldn't it behoove you to write that offer and structure all that in, especially in the market that we're dealing with right now? Are there any pertinent items to disclose? And those things would be like unpermitted areas or some other major thing that might be wrong with the property. Tony, is there anything that you wanted to add to this?
No, not to the information that's presented on the screen, but I think it's important that especially today, and it's always in this business, it's a people business, and I think a phone call to the agent asking these questions as opposed to a text message or an email goes a lot further, because you want to develop a rapport, and you want to have a good friendly relationship with that agent in the event that you do get into escrow. And if you go the extra step and make that phone call, you've probably beaten out a couple of other agents that haven't, and that may have the same offer that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And you nailed it. It is absolutely a relationship business. And I don't want to in any way suggest, because it's not like a good old boys club kind of thing, but having that rapport and relationship with someone is really important. I've had offers accepted just because of either the rapport or the relationship or experience that I've had with that other agent, and they fought for me for the seller to accept our offer versus other people's, because they say this guy's a professional, he writes clean offers, it's he doesn't mess around, he knows what he's doing. So those kind of things are super important. And awesome! I don't know if you guys can see on the screen, but Miranda had a great tip, so thank you for that. Okay, next page, A2. So we're going to go through their purchase contract. We have it up here so you guys can take notes. Obviously, it's being recorded. If you have the purchase contract in front of you, that would be helpful. Write notes on the purchase contract. If you have it in the margins, you can highlight, circle, use that as a reference. You can take it on regular notes. You can do it later if you want. A2. If it's not applicable, use NA in both areas of the contract. I see this all too often is agents will leave things blank. It's not illegal or anything like that to leave it blank, but you don't want the opportunity for someone else to insert some information or value in an empty spot. If you don't mean to have it apply, then leave it as NA unless you're doing that for a strategy. But try to stay away from that as much as possible. A2, if it's a dual agency, make sure to use the proper name of our firm or any firm that you're doing business with. So in our case, Keller Williams Honolulu is not KW, it's not KWH, it's not KW Honolulu, it is Keller Williams Honolulu. Other firms as well don't abbreviate, use their name correctly. A2D, if one of the parties is not represented at all, such as a FSBO, use this section to properly inform that party that they are a customer and not a client. Tony, what's the difference between a customer and a client?
You have a fiduciary responsibility for. You're not allowed to share any information about that client to the other party. A customer, whatever they tell you, you can go ahead and relay everything to the agent on the other side.
Yeah.
And I want to just really touch based on dual agency. You know, if you are in a dual agency situation, it's really important that you have the dual agency agreement executed by your client before the offer is written up, so that they know exactly what's going on and what you can and cannot do for them. And I think they're going to start getting away from dual agency. You know, working with the Standard Forms Committee, they're looking at different ways to be in a dual agency situation, but also represent your client and fight for them, regardless of whether it's a dual agency or not. You know, advocate for your client.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we all, just to be clear, and I feel like it shouldn't need to be said, but just to ensure is, with a customer versus a client, we owe both parties honesty, professionalism, and all that other kind of stuff. That still applies. The only difference is the fiduciary responsibility is on one versus the other. All right, so tips. Earnest money deposits are a great way to negotiate a contract. It is one of a few components that show the strength of an offer. Instead of putting down $10,000 on an initial deposit, for example, consider splitting it up, $2,500, $7,500, or $5,000, $5,000. I'll give my 2 cents on this, Tony. If you feel like you want to add to it, please do. But here's the bottom line with earnest money is, in our state, specifically Hawaii, because I know I've seen some other agents from other states jumping on too, so thank you for joining. So I'm talking about rules and best practices as our state in Hawaii. With that said, you know, you can put down earnest money, but once it goes into escrow, that buyer has parted ways with that money. And it says it in the contract. There's a variety of different contingencies in place that a buyer can cancel and hope to receive a full refund on it. But in this particular state, both sides have to agree to release those funds. And so if you're making a deposit, that deposit is an escrow. Now, I think, you know, in the last 6 years or so, I've only had 2 instances where the other party decided not to release those funds, but that's still 2 instances. So another way that you can structure something, if they want to put down $10,000 for a deposit, the biggest reason why someone would cancel an escrow is because of the results or findings of J1. So if you have a $10,000 deposit that you wanted to use as an initial deposit, $2,500 initial deposit that's due within a couple of days of acceptance, and the remainder can be due, as an example, 2 business days after J1 satisfaction. So you're still getting $10,000 in there, but you're only putting at risk $2,500 up front, and then the remaining $7,500 in this example can be after they've seen the property and gone through the property with a home inspector. And in both instances, in my experiences that I've had in the last 6 years of 2 of them not releasing the earnest money back to the buyer, we did the home inspection and we canceled within our right to cancel, and the sellers did not release those funds. So that's why that might be a good suggestion to structure it like that. Any points that you want to add to that, Tony?
I also don't think you want to make the deposit too big, where the seller, you know, has the idea that I'm going to keep all this money. And I've seen contracts come in, you know, $300,000, $400,000 purchase price with $100,000 as an additional deposit. And I think
unnecessary.
Yeah. So when you're talking to your buyer, just say, look, in the event that your money is tied up, how much are you willing to have tied up for a period of, that could be 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah. And here's what happens, guys, just to let you know, if both parties can't agree to release those earnest money funds, let's say it goes sideways and the buyer tries to cancel and the seller refuses to release those funds. If it's held in escrow for too long, it goes into interpleader, which is basically like a court proceeding where a judge has to get involved to determine how things are going to be split up. If you're talking about $10,000, trust me, that $10,000, while it's a lot of money, I'm not minimizing that. That'll get eaten up real quick by attorneys and fees and everything else. It's just not worth it. So that's a great point, Tony. Sometimes it's unnecessary. If you have a huge down payment, just let that down payment be the down payment towards the end of closing. But again, this is the market of the moment too. It all comes down as well to, I haven't seen too much pushback in contracts on earnest money, to be quite honest with you, which is a good thing, because that means that there's not a lot of money being put into at risk. But knowing the market of the moment is important. I mean, if you're putting down $1,000 on $1 million purchase, that's also not appropriate for that type of purchase. So understand the common standards for each purchase and market.
And one of the things, Chad, too, is that, even though that section 01, 02, 03, the cancellation section of the contract states that, in the event that something is canceled, the money is to be released or forfeited or, disputed. It doesn't matter whether the seller agrees or not. It doesn't matter what's in the contract. If you have one party to the contract that just decided not going to be fair and play ball in accordance with the contract, they can tie everything up for a period in a definite period of time.
Yeah, good point. C1, make sure, now it says it in the contract, but I always like to just make sure that everything is spelled out. AM, PM, you're going to want to check, but Hawaiian Standard Time, it says it in the contract that that's assumed. But the reason why I like to put it in there anyways on this line regardless is because we're dealing with clients that are either buying sight unseen maybe or writing the offer as they are currently residing on the mainland, or vice versa, where the sellers might be located in a different location. So just to eliminate any confusion, doesn't hurt to put 3 extra letters in there. C2, when using additional deposits, use language like 2 business days after J1 satisfaction. Do not use things like 2 biz, B-I-Z days, or 2 days after J1. Give some reasons why. So as an example, I always think of things as if you end up in court. So if we end up in court and we're sitting in front of a judge and jury and they're reviewing the contract that I wrote for my client and it says 2 biz days, that's not going to make me look too good in a courtroom as far as being a professional. So there's room to put it in zip form. So please just enter that in 2 business days after J1. Another one is 2 days after J1. It seems self-explanatory. It seems benign when you write it, but a J1 what? When you satisfy it, or after J1 expires, or after J1 itself? I mean, to clear it up, I always try to put something that's very self-explanatory, like 2 business days after J1 satisfaction. On D1, if there's something that's not applicable, don't leave it blank. In fact, this kind of makes me chuckle every time. It says it right in the instructions on D1. Write NA if not applicable. It says it right there. So you guys sometimes would put, a check mark and then leave everything else blank. Just write NA if it's not applicable. Tip, if you are competing with other offers, so this is something that I would say is the market of the moment is important to know. This tip that I have written here is something that works. I wouldn't recommend using it in this market as we're dealing with right now, which is basically you're writing an offer maybe $1,000 over asking, and as a listing agent, you guys all know that if somebody calls you and says, hey, do you have any offers in hand? You say yes. Do you have anything over asking? The answer would be yes. They're not going to give you, hopefully if they're a good agent and an ethical agent, they're not giving you the actual amount received, but they'll say, yes, I have something over asking. Well, if it's only $1,000, it's still over asking. In the market right now that we're in, the market of the moment, if that buyer wants that property, and then of course that price is okay with them, and you look at comps and you advise them that they might be writing something that's over market value or over what the appraised value might come in at, those are things that you need to train and need to disclose to your buyer. But this particular tip is not going to work right now. Just put your best foot forward and write a stronger offer. An appraisal clause is more valuable than this tip right now. But I will say, Antonio, I would love your input on this, but the market's bananas right now. It's been bananas for a year. Certainly the last 6 to 8 months has been absolutely nutty. This is not forever. This is like kind of a culmination of a lot of different things, coming to a head all at one time. With interest rates being unbelievably low, and anything can happen with rates, but so far the Fed has said that they're going to keep it low for this year, or try to. But there's a lot of influx that could happen for mortgage-backed securities and other things that the government doesn't have direct control over could spike, and there's still some volatility in market movement and so forth. But with rates being as low as they are, with the lack of inventory specifically in our market, nationwide as well, but certainly in our market, has created a market that people are willing to pay huge. It's reminding me a little bit of the market in San Francisco about a year or so ago. What do you think, Tony? Do you think this? I don't think that this is going to be a permanent thing by any stretch. I think this is anywhere from, 9 months to a year and a half kind of thing with some movements in between. What is your thoughts?
Well, we've seen the market like this before. It does stop at some point in time. I just don't know when it's going to stop. That's the problem.
Yeah. So, I think that there's so many tools that we have available to us locally here. And I taught a class last month about this. Is the market of the moment is you as an agent understanding what's going on, what the landscape looks like, what things are selling for, what people are buying things, what the days on market is, sales price to list price ratio. All those kind of things are really, really important to understand. So we have all the tools available. At Keller Williams, we have an exclusive report called the TMO, the Total Market Overview Report. If you need it, I'll send it to you. If you want me to train you on how to use it and how to read it, I'm happy to help you with that. But there's also tools like InfoSparks, which is available to all licensed agents in this MLS. So definitely use it. It's phenomenal. It's a great tool to get a better understanding of what's going on in the market. Moving on to E2. And by the way, guys, any agents that's jumping on or reviewing this from another firm, these are our firm's standards. This is what we teach to. I would say just double check with your BIC at your firm to ensure that it sticks or adheres with their own policy and standards. E2, if something is not applicable, don't leave it blank. I've mentioned that before, put NA. E3, even if there's own PV, so this is something that I get kind of pushback from on some people. Even if there's own PV, use E3 to ensure you get a copy of all the documents, contracts, etc. Because sometimes there's a maintenance agreement. Sometimes there's all kinds of other. Oh, thanks, Laura. There's all kinds of other documents that might go along with an own PV system. So traditionally, I think a lot of people thought E3 that's only for leased systems. So you can still on E2 check that it's an own system. E3 just put in there that you still want documents, if applicable, relating to that own system. I think that just adds extra security for your buyer. F2, so a lot of times people will put, now here's one thing I'll touch on real quick, Tony, is some people will put a hard date in there and some people put certain days. It's not a right or wrong thing, but it is a little, as a BIC, if I'm reviewing your file, it's a little bit of a red flag if I see a hard date in there. I might just ask why. And you might have a valid reason, and if you do, no problem whatsoever. But just know this, if you put a hard date in there, that date is not a moving target, whereas the acceptance of the contract is. You might be going back and forth on counters. You might be in negotiation if the seller's on the mainland. So if you put a hard date in there, and in your mind, when you wrote it, you did the math, and that hard date was 45 days out, by the time you get everything fully executed, you might have 39 days left or 35 days left or whatever that is. So if that's okay with you, that's fine, but you've just eaten into days, maybe unnecessarily. More often than not, a lender, depending on the type of financing, they're going to want 30 days or 45 days or 60 days if it's like a USDA or something like that. What we ask is you write in there 30 days upon the date of acceptance, and then we ask that you just put on the end of that and to be delivered vacant. And that was an advice that Tony had started to insert in there, I want to say 6-9 months ago, roughly. And that was at the advice of an attorney. I thought that's great advice. Someone might say, well, it already addresses that in the purchase contract. It says free of tenants, but to be delivered vacant, we're just covering our ground to ensure that there's no holdover tenancy by the seller and so on and so forth. So it's just, again, removing any kind of confusion, any kind of what ifs.
And Chad, because the closing date really only guarantees the transfer of title, not possession of the property. And that's the reason why we started using that clause.
Great point. Thank you. F3, before completing check with the buyer's lender, also know that days entered into F3A is a double-edged sword. So here's something to know is when you put those days on there, there's certain things that you can put in standard. Some people will ask me, well, what's standard? Just know that try not to use templates, because a template is how can you protect the buyer's best interests and help them meet their goals and priorities if you're using a template. This buyer and this buyer and this buyer might have completely different goals and timelines and so on and so forth. So while some things may be consistent on a contract or typical on a contract, you got to make sure that you understand why you're putting a certain number of days or certain information in there and how it impacts the transaction, how it impacts the buyer and the seller and so forth. With F3A, it's a one-time unilateral right to extend. In the previous iteration of the purchase contract, which was May of 2019, it was bilateral, so both sides needed to approve it. This one is unilateral. Either side can use it. And when I say it's a double-edged sword, I'll give you a for instance. Let's say that you put on there a 35-day closing on F2, so 35 days upon acceptance and to be delivered vacant. And then F3A, you have 10 days. If 10 days, you're like, I hope that we don't need to use it the 10 days on the buy side. We don't need to use the 10 days, but we absolutely need to close within that time frame because of one thing or another in the buyer's schedule. Well, it's unilateral and either side could use it. So the seller can just go, hey, I need to extend it. And they don't have to ask permission. They just activated that. And now they push an extension. They aren't required to pay for the buyer's fees or per diems or lock extensions or anything like that. So that's what I mean by a double-edged sword. There's a trick that I oftentimes, I'll use if needed, is because when you use it, you burn all of it. You don't need to use the full 10 days, but if you use one of the 10 days, you burn it, that F3A is completely gone, and the remaining days are cannot be used. And I'll give you an example of when it can right after this. But if I am dealing with an agent on the other side that's a little, I'm going to say, unpredictable, I'm not sure if they're going to try to extend or not. Maybe they're not as good as communicating as I am. And I'm not sure, they might be pushing back, might try to extend, but I absolutely cannot allow that to happen because it's going to push my buyer and put them in a predicament. I might, if I have a 10-day right to extend, I might just activate, I might use 1 day and it burns that entire thing up. So it eliminates them from being able to use it. So that's one thing that you could do. As far as how the other days could be used, be real careful about when you are accepting another firm's standard addendum. Because and I'm not going to mention who, you guys can read it on your own, but by the way, you should be reading everything. Anything that's being part of the contract, you should be having a clear understanding of it because you need to obviously discuss it with your client. But there are some firms' language that changes the terms of the contract, and that's really important for you to know. And the most common as it relates to F3A is either side can use a certain number of days, and the remaining number of days can still be used by the other side not using it. So in that example I just gave you, that would completely disregard that strategy. So just understand that. Anything you wanted to add to that, Tony?
No, that was the only thing I was going to touch on because that is in a couple of standard addendums. Cool,
perfect. F4, if you aren't competing with another offer, this is a great company, First Hawaii Title as the escrow company. E4, if it's furnished, include an inventory list. It's also helpful if you take photos of that. Just to be clear, again, try to avoid any kind of room for error or confusion and so forth. F8, buyer side, if you're writing a contract for a buyer, you'll want to select seller on both F8A and F8B and write none in the blanks. Pretty self-explanatory. F8, the listing side, if you know that there's an assessment that the seller is currently making payments on, you want to consider countering and having that prorated. Again, the advice as real estate agents, the advice that we give our client might be contrary depending on who we're representing. So the advice that we give to a buyer might be completely opposite on the advice that we give to the seller. So that's why you're going to see a lot of things on here that might seem contrary. And it's because it depends on what side you're currently on. But if there is an assessment, make sure that the seller discloses it. You disclose. Over disclosure is a good thing. So make sure it's disclosed. And if there is a known assessment, even address it in section Q. F12, if the buyer wishes to have more than one set of keys to the property, note it in E2. The previous iteration of the purchase contract, 2 sets of keys were standard. I would highly recommend in E2, which is all the inclusions of the property. In other, there's a couple of things in other. In other, you should put in there if attached as attached. And also, if you want a second set of keys, you can put that on there, whether it's garage keys, fobs, and so on and so forth. So that should be helpful and relatively standard. H1 on the buy side, make sure that you enter the type of proof of funds, such as POF, which stands for proof of funds from buyer's lender. So here's something that I see often, and I'll give you my 2 cents. I'd love to hear your thoughts behind it too, Tony. So in H1, on the bottom of H1, it says on there that you can check the type of evidence that you're going to provide, such as a bank statement, verification from depository, or other. So here's the pros and cons. And again, here's the contrary advice that I'm going to give you. If I'm on the listing side, I represent the seller, and someone sends it over, especially if it's a large purchase with a large down payment, I'm going to want to ensure that it says bank statement on there, because I want to know how much money the buyers have. I want to kind of see all that information. If I'm on the buy side, though, I don't want to do that. I don't want to provide that information. Number one, there's personal information that's on there, and it also could, it could send the negotiation sideways. Like for instance, if it's a hard negotiation, you're trying to get the price, which is typical, right? The buyer's trying to get the price as low as possible. The seller wants the highest price as possible. Well, if you finally get to a negotiation and the buyers are putting down maybe 30% or 40%, and they see, and it's been a tough negotiation back and forth, and the seller then sees the bank statements for the buyer, and the buyer has $1 million sitting in the bank, that doesn't bode well for the negotiation. When you get to J1, when you get to other parts of the negotiation, the seller might be a little salty. They might hold that against them. It might send the negotiation in a different direction. That information is not necessary if you represent the buyer to provide. Likewise, the verification from depository, that's a letter from the bank. Sometimes it's an automatic letter that they can draft up. Sometimes it's the teller that types it up. Same thing. I would recommend a proof of funds letter from the buyer's lender. That just says, if it's whatever ABC bank, it just says, hi, this is the loan officer for such and such buyer. We've reviewed their funds and they have the necessary funds to close. That is more than sufficient, and that's also the safest way to provide information to the other side without getting their personal finances involved too. So on the list side I mentioned before, I would probably want the bank statement instead. So what if, or when, if at all, would you use both H1 and H2? So H2 is the contingency on obtaining funds. So the contingency would be things like if you have gift funds that are pending, if you're trying to sell a property. One of the examples is you could have a combination of both. I mean, it says or in the instructions, H1 or H2, but there are situations that you could use both. And the situation that I can think of, and Tony, you tell me what you can think of if there's anything that's different, is if you have a bunch of funds already liquid and available, but in addition, maybe there's something else that's waiting to either be approved from a HELOC, or you're waiting for another property to sell. So it's common. Some can be verified right now, but some of them are still contingent upon something else happening. What else can you do?
Because you can have your earnest money deposits, in hand, and the balance of your down payments coming from some additional funds. So you want to use both. I want to go back to H1 for a second.
Sure.
H1A, verification of funds. Normally I like to leave that NA if I'm representing the buyer, because then it gives the seller the option of saying, well, I don't like your bank statement, I'm going to go ahead and cancel you.
Right.
After the fact, 3 days or 7 days, within 03. So I just remove that altogether, or I put 0 days and just give them, a verification from a depository institution, and that's it. Mm-hmm. I'm in a transaction now where the buyer's agent says, hey, have you approved my client's verification of funds? And I'm like, well, we don't need to because we haven't responded, so therefore it's accepted. But it was the first time that somebody had ever asked me if the seller had approved it. So people are conscious of it.
Awesome. That's a great tip. Moving on to I-1B, buyer side. You'll want this date as reasonably short as possible. Ideally, you'll want to receive the SRPDS so that you can review it and forward it to the home inspector for the home inspection. So this is one of those things that I think by default, there's a lot of agents that just put in there 7 days, 10 days, 12 days, or whatever it is. This is the amount of days that you're asking the seller to have the seller disclosure, which is required, the SRPDS, provided to you upon acceptance. I mean, if you think about it, you want it as soon as possible. In most cases, at least when I represent a seller, I have that thing filled out already. That thing is already done. It's already completed. I already have it. I typically will even post it on the MLS so that it's available in the supplement section anyways. However, shorten that time up, because if you have as an example, a 10-day J1, 10-day period for home inspection, and you have a 10-day I1, which is the amount of time that you're going to be able to receive that SRPDS, you want that in your hand so you can take a look at it. And by the way, please be looking at that. When you get that in, you should be looking thoroughly through that. And Tony and I teach a class on SRPDS and how to read it and the red flags on that as well. But make sure you read it, review it, ask questions. If they say things like, hey, this was repaired or this was fixed or what have you, ask for receipts, ask for who did it. Is there warranty information? There should be a little bit of back and forth. The other thing is, what you want to do is be able to highlight, circle certain things, red flags, and send it over to the home inspector so that they can pay closer attention to possible red flag issues. So if the seller had noted that they had their AC fixed 3 times in the last 3 years, that's kind of a lot. I mean, normal maintenance aside, having it fixed or repaired 3 times in the last 3 years is a lot. So you might want to highlight that and forward that over to the home inspector so when they go out there, they can pay closer attention to see if there's a leak or there's something wrong with the AC or whatever it is. But you wouldn't even know that if you didn't shorten that amount of time so you can have time to receive that and review it. Anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay. On I2 on the buy side, you'll want the days as minimal as possible so the buyer is aware of any issues quickly. On the listing side, you might want it as long as possible to have any potential issues remedied. So here's the thing, the I2 is for the amended disclosure, right? So we talked about the initial disclosure being I1, I2 is the amended disclosure. Why do you want, as a buy side, why do you want that amended disclosure as quickly as possible? Same exact thing, same exact reason as I1. You want it ASAP. You want to know right away, because if it's something that's major, you want time to be able to react to it, maybe even cancel escrow if need be, depending if it's a health and safety issue. However, on the list side, on I2, the reason why I would want that longer, so I told you that is that when I have a listing, I already have that SRPDS completed and filled out. But if you need to have it amended, I want to be able to have 7 or 10 days in there. And here's the reason why. If let's say that while after the home inspection, let's say your AC goes down. And whose responsibility is it if the AC goes down after the home inspection? It's going to be the seller. So the seller gets it fixed, gets it working, has it immediately repaired. And this is all within the 10 days or 7 days that you put on there. It's much easier to go to the buy side and say, hey, FYI, we've amended the seller disclosure. The AC went down on Monday, but not to worry, we already had it completely fixed and repaired on Wednesday. Here's receipts. You just delivered a solution. You didn't deliver a problem. It's much easier to handle it like that on the list side, if at all possible. So buy side, you want to know as quickly as possible. List side, you might want to have it extended out a little bit. We have a couple of questions. Carrie, who's in our production area, there's some questions that are popping up. Are those questions, Carrie, that you want to put on the screen and we can chat about it? Oh, okay. Rustin has a question. Can we NA that's so it's satisfied at the time of exception? What part is Rustin talking about? Rustin, send us over a comment and we can kind of add some clarification on that. Is it enough for the loan officer to write a letter confirming buyer has available funds? Yes. I just write the lender say I've reviewed. Yeah, that's for, and what Miranda, what you're referring to is a proof of funds letter, and that is absolutely sufficient. So that's not a problem at all. Great question. All right, I3A pertains to the receipt of the SRPDS. I3B pertains to the time to examine the SRPDS. Two different things. And examination of it, you want to, if you're on the buy side, you want that as long as possible so you can have time to react or make decisions or maybe even request for another inspector to go out if it's a plumbing issue or an electrical issue or something to that effect. I3C pertains to the time to examine an amended SRPDS, amended by the seller. And let's see. I3 is seller driven, while I4 is buyer driven. Oh, the clarification from Rustin Tong, his question was H1, regards to Tony using the NA. So yes, and you can put NA and you can put anything else in there, Russ, or you can put what Tony does is he puts, so for H1A, the number of days, you can check it in there and put 0 days. You can put 1 day if you want to keep it, short. You can also, and the whole point of that is if you read below that, he's trying to void out the option where the seller may select to terminate this contract. And if you notice, it says if seller's not satisfied. That's all it says. So it doesn't mean that it's not valid or it can't be verified. It just means it's not satisfied.
And the reason for it is because we had that happen where the buyer's financing changed. Like a week later, they submitted a new proof of funds letter and the sellers didn't agree with it and went ahead and gave a cancellation notice and put a backup offer into first position without the first contract without being canceled. So no matter how long you're in the business, you see things on a transaction basis, weekly basis that, is a tidbit and it's a learning experience. We just pass that on to everybody.
As a buyer's agent, is there, hey Rustin, I think we're going to have to give you a number of tokens. Like I think he's on his 3rd token and there's no more than 4 tokens per class. As a buyer's agent, is there a way to structure the H1 seller review of the proof of funds?
You counter offer.
Yep. All right, let's move on here. Tip, general disclosures. Lead-based paint disclosure is required as an added disclosure to all parties built.
Yeah, can you go back one more thing?
Sure.
Go back to I4. I mean, you said this before.
And it's right there. It's small, but it's right there.
Yeah. So if you're representing the buyer and you're writing your contract, I3C and I4B should be the same time frame, because what would happen if you're the buyer and you're doing your home inspection and you make the seller aware of something. If they come back and they give you an amended disclosure statement within 1 day and they have countered I4B with 1 day, you're put on notice and it doesn't give you enough time to do any further investigation. So that's why when you represent the buy side, short time frames are great for a fast closing. But if there's a severe issue with the property, it doesn't give the buyer enough time to move forward and make decisions, informed decisions anyway.
And also different dates kind of potentially create a conflict too. So the same date is actually very helpful. I3 is seller driven. I4 is buyer driven. You mentioned that. So lead-based paint, there is a $10,000 fine by the EPA per incident. So missing initials, missing signatures is $10,000 per incident. Make sure that you have it completed the right way. One of the things that we oftentimes will do is we'll send out there. You have to, if you notice on there, it says that you sent Protect Your Home, that disclosure, some EPA PDF pamphlet. I'll send it to the client and have the client initial it as part of the purchase contract. So any property that was built 1978 or earlier, and that also has the lead-based paint disclosure in it, I also include the Protect Your Home, Protect Your Family EPA disclosure, and I'll have them sign that as well, just to ensure that we have record that they completed it. So definitely do that. J1, if the property is older or larger, or something unusual about the property, leave enough time to conduct all necessary inspections. So just for instance, if the property is 35, 40 years or older and it's a single family home, automatically you should be checking, having a sewer inspection. If there's PV on the roofs and it's outside of having a maintenance agreement or a warranty of some sort, you might want to have the PV examined by a PV professional. If there's something that with the plumbing, where you see wet spots on the roof or stains on the wall, you might want to have a plumber go there as well. In fact, I know an agent just the other day that because there were some issues, some other issues with the property, they brought a contractor along with the home inspector, all at the same time, just to kind of get everything handled at one time. So there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I know that we're in a very competitive market right at the moment, the market of the moment. But don't be so quick to get an offer accepted that really does put your buyer at risk or at jeopardy. Meaning, I've seen some J1s at like 5 days, and my question would be why? Like, what do you know about the property that is beneficial to the buyer that they shouldn't be concerned with having any inspections done in that time frame? And 7 days should probably be the minimum, and that's even real tough. But if you have a home inspection, and that should be determined, by the way, how new the property is. If the property is newer, you can kind of get away with some of that stuff. But when you're thinking that a property or offer is going to be accepted, you should already be reaching out to your inspector or inspectors and scheduling something and finding out who's available. Because if you wait till the last minute, that's really a shame on you. If you have a 7-day J1, you should not be doing a home inspection on day 7, because that's not enough time to have a conversation with the buyer. Are we moving forward? Maybe even to get quotes or estimates on things that need to be repaired or done. So make sure that you look out for their best interest and plan having a time in there. Tony, anything you want to add to that?
If you have a 7-day home inspection and you're going to be looking for credits or repairs, don't wait till day 7.
Yeah.
I mean, you should do it on day 4.
Yeah, give you enough time. Yeah, you would expect the same thing. I mean, if and to Tony's point, and thank you for bringing that, Tony, if you have a 7-day J1, if you send over the request for credits or request for repairs on day 7, that's not very professional. I mean, things happen, a one-off maybe, but this game and the rapport and relationship building that you're going to need to have with other agents, your cooperative agents, is about professionalism. And I guarantee that you would not appreciate that if they called you on the 7th day to let you know that they're going to be asking for a large credit or they want to repair. That's not enough time to plan and pivot. The other thing too, if you represent the buyer and the buyer tells you that if this repair or this credit or a combination thereof is not going to happen and it's a deal breaker, to send it over to them on that last day, you're putting them in a little bit of a quandary, right? Because you better have that conversation, or at least better have a termination of escrow document also completed as well. So if you pass that time frame, if it's 7 days and you pass that time frame, it's on day 8 and you didn't react and ask for an extension of J1, a credit, a repair, then you would have already had to have canceled. Otherwise, that window is closed. So just bear that in mind. And also, one thing I'll add too is J1 is not a catch-all. A lot of agents think and use it as a catch-all, like, oh, I'll just cancel on J1. There's contingencies in there for a reason. So you want to make sure that what you're canceling is valid and warranted. On the flip side, Michelle says, what happens if you're the seller's agent and they send the repair on 11/59 on the expiration date? So you're the seller's agent and they send it to you. If they send it to you, that's the same thing, right? So if you represent the seller and I represent the seller, today is the last day. It's now 11:59 p.m. There's nothing that you can do. I mean, what can you do? I'm certainly not going to. First of all, I'm extremely old. There's no way that I'm even up at 11:59. But if I were, I'm certainly not getting my client out of bed to let them know that this other agent sent me something at 11:59 asking for repairs or credits. I would respond in the morning and say, we're outside of that time frame, but we have the duty of instruction. So I'm still going to present that information to the seller, but let the seller know that window has closed. If they still would like to provide credit or repair, they can do that. They still can have the ability to do that, but I'm going to also let them know that contingency has been exhausted or expired. Tony, anything you want to add to that?
No, except, to Michelle's answer, if you represent the seller and they give it to you 11:59, that's great for you because you don't have to do anything with it. They basically bought themselves a home on the following day, regardless of what the repairs or the requests were for.
Okay, moving on to avoid confusion. I see this happen all the time. J3 is final walkthrough. J8 is removal of items from property. J9 is cleaning. I would highly recommend, people do this all the time. They'll put, first of all, our firm standards, KW standards. Again, other agents outside, check with your firm to find out what their standards are. Ours is to have a minimum of 5 days. And Tony, why is it a minimum of 5 days?
Issues with the cleaning, or if there's issues with the property, there are items that were supposed to be covered under a J1 remedy. There's not enough time to pull a file if it's already going down to the Bureau of Conveyances and the loan is funded. It's too late.
We just want to plan ahead and give enough time to react and to pivot. But in addition, what we see often is, and I see this more often than I would like, but I see every single thing the same amount of days. So 5 days for J3, 5 days for cleaning, 5 days for removal of items. And I know it says minimum days. People always will go, yeah, but they can. The list side can figure that out. Let me ask you a question. How many times do you think a transaction coordinator looks at the contract and goes, oh, you know what? Instead of putting the number of days that's written on the contract and agreed upon on this fully executed document, I'm just going to put a different set of days on here because I got to plan ahead. And there's no one who does that. If you put 5 days, 5 days, 5 days, that's exactly what happens. And I see all too often the other side going, oh, you know what? I need an extension of J3. And then so that 5 days that you planned for now is creeping in to 2 or 3 days, and they're pushing you back because they still haven't had it cleaned. Or the day that you're trying to go do the final walkthrough, it's the following day that they're doing removal of items or cleaning. Save yourself the headache. Assume the other side does not know anything at all. I don't mean in a rude way, but just plan for that. And put it chronologically. Remove items in 7 days, clean in 6 days, final walkthrough in 5 days. You're setting yourself up for success when you plan it out now. All right, J8, in entire property, check it or not check it. Why or why not? Here, they added that in the new version of the purchase contract that really hasn't been tested to my knowledge in court or anything. I haven't heard about it at the board level. But if you're on the buy side and you check that and you check it with the intention of like, I want to have the gutters cleaned out, I want to have the driveway power washed, you should not be using that as like a trick strategy. If that's what you want and that would make the buyers happy, just write it into section Q. Just write it in there. All parties agree that buyer shall have the property, or the seller shall have the property cleaned professionally, and whatever portion of the property that you're referring to. However, if you're on the list side, I absolutely would counter that out because again, it hasn't been tested, and you don't want to be the test. In other words, so Tony, do you agree with that, or do you want to add anything to that?
No, absolutely. I think you should take it out.
Yeah,
I've seen a little bit. I've seen some dispute on what's considered professional cleaning for the entire outside of the property, to the point where people wanted the sidewalks pressure washed, and they wanted the house pressure washed on the outside. So I would just leave it out.
Yeah, it's really not worth getting into for that, to be quite honest with you. K1 rather should not be used. This is commonly used on other islands. This is with regards to staking and survey. Survey does have the boundary lines put in it, but it also has, most importantly, the document that's called a survey. That's the one that you want to use if you're using it at all. This is typically for single-family homes. If you're buying a single-family home or a detached condo or a PUD, which is a planned unit development, and it's relatively new, and the fence lines are put up by developers. This happens often in Gentry, some parts of Ocean Point, some parts of Sea Country. You may not need a survey, and it's okay not necessarily to have a survey in there for those newer properties. But you got to make sure, like, the real question is who put those walls up. If it's the neighbors, if it's the seller, you want a survey. You want to see if there's any encroachments or what have you. And one thing that's very common right now, I've seen a lot of, is people accepting existing surveys. And this is not a bad idea. This is not, oh my gosh, you shouldn't do that. But here's what you shouldn't do. On section Q, this is the wrong wording to have. Buyer to accept existing survey. that's not the right wording at all to use, because there's no time for examination. There's nothing whatsoever. What it should say is you should have some ability to not only when you're going to receive it, how long the buyer will have to examine it, and if they're not satisfied with it, how are they going to cancel? So if you are accepting an existing survey, it should be worded something to the effect of seller shall provide to buyer survey dated, whatever the date is that you know in advance of, within 3 days of acceptance. Buyer shall have X amount of days to review and examine, and if not satisfied, buyer shall have the right to cancel using provision O2 of the purchase contract. And why O2? Because it allows for them to have their earnest money refunded back to them in that scenario. If there are, Uni is asking if there are multiple offers, which area of the contract are the safest to shorten timeframe periods on the buyer's offer. So I'm gonna, Uni, that's a great question. I'm gonna come back to that at the end because there's a couple of things that I can tell you about that. But one last thing about the survey. If you're going to accept an existing survey, what I would absolutely recommend that you do is have the sellers put in the SRPDS that there were no modifications or changes to the property's fence lines or walls since that survey dated such and such. And the reason is because that actually holds them to a tighter timeline. There's a 7-year statute of frauds and a 2-year non-disclosure tied to the SRPDS. So you kind of create a little bit of a restrictive legal issue for the seller if you're on the buy side accepting an existing survey, which is good for the buyer if you do those things. Make sure you have that wording in there. Make sure that you have the SRPDS updated accordingly as well. Cleaning, J3, J4. This is something that we put this in there the last time. Do you remember, Tony? Because this issue came about quite a bit. A buyer does not have the right to cancel as a result of dissatisfaction during the final walkthrough.
Right.
That's a big one, because people, I've heard agents say this, that you have the right to cancel during J1, during this, during that, during final walkthrough. You do not have the right to cancel. The final walkthrough, the purpose of the final walkthrough is to ensure that the property is in the same condition as when the buyer inspected it during J1, that nothing new has occurred since J1. And of course, if there's any repairs that you agreed upon, then make sure that obviously you can examine those repairs, but it is not a right to cancel. There is, however, a remedy that's built into that, which is J4, which is a withholding. And the withholding is not a profit. The withholding is up to 150% because sometimes it might go, the estimate might go over. But depending on if the escrow company is facilitating that, they'll give the refund back to either party, whoever is due. The buyer can request a reinspection for repairs, but not for cleaning. So we've gotten that a lot recently as well. Rustin, Chad, for the great language that you and Tony are putting forward, may you please have the language emailed us to as a recap or taking notes, however, the specific wording would be appreciated. Yes, sir. We'll do, Rustin.
For a fee. For an additional fee.
For an additional fee, we will send it over to you. Tip, if not competing and in an area where the developer has fences, I already mentioned this, ask the seller to add that to the SRPDS. I've mentioned that as well. That's super, super important. So keep that in mind.
Also, if the seller wants you to accept a previous survey, that they should at least provide it to you prior to even writing the offer. I mean, if they did a survey back in 1960 and they put up a couple of new rock walls and some fences, like, they can have all kinds of encroachments on there.
Yeah.
And it becomes an issue for your buyer when they become a seller.
That's a huge issue. I mean, if you close on a property in which you represented the buyer and there's an encroachment, that the subject property is encroaching onto a neighbor, or God forbid, they're encroaching onto multiple neighbors, they walked into a huge potential liability. Huge. So it's something to be real cautious of. And everyone is fine, especially in Hawaii, everyone's family and a little bit territorial if someone has lived there for a long time. And this could have been a verbal arrangement or something agreed upon with the previous family, but now there's new people are moving in and they might not have that same kind of warm and fuzzy feeling about allowing that encroachment to take place. And you never know. So it is really important.
And Chad, let me touch on one other thing when we talk about that scenario about, neighbors being neighbors, and, I'm okay with having you and we can repair a wall. We don't need anything in writing. The same thing holds true with easements. I'm in a situation where my clients have a right to use an easement for a driveway. The easement's been in place since like 1940. And maybe at the time that all the parties that were using the easements had some sort of a verbal agreement. Well, that's not necessarily the case today. And what's happening is that the lender wants something in writing of who is going to be making the repairs in case there's no maintenance road agreement for the driveway. So the lender wants to know, okay, who's going to be responsible in case the driveway gets all torn up, So that's delayed closings for us, and we have a cure for it, but it was at the last minute and became a condition of the loan.
Awesome, thank you. So here's a tip: write in who the buyer selects for TIR in section Q. So L2 is TIR, as you guys know. Section Q, you can write in different clauses. I would absolutely not write clauses in unless you've spoken to your BIC and you have some direction on what you're trying to do. Sometimes, again, people just kind of write a bunch of random things in there. One thing that I used to do automatically is I would put, because in TIR, you as the buyer's agent have to provide the listing side on who the buyer selects for the termite inspector. If you write it into section Q as Q1, that satisfies that immediately. So that's an easy one. M1, I see this happen occasionally, not anyone that's a KW agent, I see it outside of that though, is in section Q, they'll put NA for M1. That is absolutely, if you notice, if you look at M1, there is no little box that allows you to either check it in or NA it out. There's a reason for that. It's not supposed to be removed or eliminated from the purchase contract. Do not do that. It accounts for a lot of other things aside from just association documents and so forth. M2, it is advisable to write the offer with electronically formatted documents via email and internet address where the documents are located. Otherwise, if the transaction doesn't close, you're going to have to return all those documents back to the listing agent. So hard copies and CDs or DVDs, I'd recommend leaving out. There's a couple of areas, I think, Tony, you're going through one right now where they only allow for hard copies. It rarely happens, but let them counter that back to you. If you represent a seller who is trying to decide whether or not to sell, like maybe they want to rent, you can have the escrow officer put together a net sheet to include the HARPTA or FERPTA, whichever is applicable, withholding. This is, again, if HARPTA is applicable. This could be a very impactful demonstration on what they should do. So this is in the situation that you're representing a seller. Maybe it's a military that used to occupy the property. They're going to be PCSing or relocating out. And they're saying, you know what, I'm not sure if I want to sell or if I want to rent. One thing that is helpful is if you put a net sheet together showing what that HARPTA withholding might be, that almost always is going to go, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was such a big fee. And they might consider selling immediately. So again, we're here to educate, and that's what we want to do. When would be a good time to add a covenants inspection to? Oh, this is perfect. Thank you for bringing that up. So here's a covenants inspection is not something that's typical. I've used it many times. You want to be careful on how you use it and when you use it. And whenever you're writing an offer, again, when we're cooperating with another broker, don't assume that they know the language and they are as well educated and trained as you are. But you also don't want to be demeaning. So oftentimes when I'll write an offer, I'll call the other side and say, hey, I'm sure that you already know what an escalation clause is, but I'm adding this escalation clause to ensure that we're the highest and best offer, blah, blah, blah. Or I know that you already know what an appraisal clause is, but I'm adding it in to ensure that if the property doesn't appraise, we will cover the difference. And then submit your offer, because you want to tell that other side what exactly it is that you're doing. Likewise, with a covenants inspection, what that is if you are in a condominium or a townhome or anywhere that has CC&Rs, the covenants inspection is where the property manager or the actual HOA will go and do an inspection on the property to ensure there's no violations. So here's a very easy one is if you're in a high rise and you look and you notice that there's a handful of people that have window ACs. Not every unit, but there's a handful of them. It's very easy when you're showing the property to assume, oh yeah, there's a window AC. It's great. It's a great benefit to have. But what if that window AC wasn't even approved by the HOA? Just because it's there doesn't mean that it's allowed to be there. And especially if you only see a handful of people that have them, you might write the offer and ask for a covenants inspection, which is the property manager, the resident manager doing an inspection to ensure, in this case, if that was your concern, to have the window AC, that it's allowed to be there. And if in fact it is, then you're good to go. But ask the right questions first, Uni, when you call. If there's anything that's out of place, like there's some areas that are single family homes, but they do have CC&Rs like Ocean Point, where people will put like tool sheds outside. Some are approved, some may not be approved. So those are things that you just want to ask the right questions. But I would use them as needed. Oh, Lisa brought up a great point, or an enclosed lanai. Absolutely, that's a great point especially for condos. So commonly used special terms. Appraisal clause is, again, super powerful and absolutely part of a tool that you can use in the market at the moment. Escalation clause, you can use it, but it doesn't carry the same weight that it would have carried a year and a half ago. So again, know when to use your certain components. Building permit package, that is more often than not, it's for single family residences, but you can also use it in condos and things too, just to make sure that, like an enclosed lanai or like an addition or other modifications, all have the proper permits associated with it. TIR selection, that's what I mentioned before, where you're already in Q1, you're selecting who that inspector is going to be. And I'll say this for this section, Uni, we'll email you, Michelle, some great inspectors that you can use. We have one actually. Mid-Pacific Termite is one of our approved vendors, and he's purchased a ton of Bold and a ton of other Mega Camp packages for everyone. So I'll send you his information as well. So you asked, what are some of the things that you can do for? And Carrie, you can put Rustin's thing back up after I say this. I'm going to just go through this real quick. So what are some of the things that you can shorten or you can add to? It's very competitive out there. The one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to put your buyers at risk. Like, you don't want to make the purchase contract where I've seen this happen in other markets in other states, especially like in California, for instance, where they'll eliminate appraisal clauses, eliminate J1s, which is never eliminated J1, but they're eliminating all these contingencies. Basically, the buyer at that point is kind of forced to purchase. While that's beneficial to the seller, that is absolutely not advisable to do. We got to look out for their best interest. So there are certain things that you can do, though. Like, for instance, you can reimburse the seller for termite inspection. So termite inspection report can run anywhere from $350 to $550 depending on the size of the property. So you can put language like buyer agrees to reimburse the cost of TIR upon successful closing. And you want to add that to everything, because otherwise, if you don't add that to the end of that statement in special terms in section Q, is the buyer might be paying for it up front. You don't want to have them incur extra costs. You just want to have them try to win the offer and pay for, offset some of the costs of the seller by reimbursing them at closing. Another one is, if you are getting a brand new survey, same thing. Buyer to reimburse the cost of survey upon successful closing. That's another one. You can also, this is a one that the agents that I'm their big four, they've used these kind of things, and most of which they've used to success is buyer agrees not to ask for repairs or credits as a result of the J1 findings. So how is that different than NA J1? The difference is it maintains all the buyer's rights for J1. If you just add that clause in there, all you're telling the seller is, hey, I know that property is being sold as is. I'm not going to ask for any credits or repairs. Could you still ask? You could. You don't want to do that in bad faith, but you could still ask. But you're putting it out there in writing that you're not asking for credits, you're not asking for repairs, but it still maintains their rights to terminate the escrow should something come up that is unmanageable or something beyond the scope of what they want to deal with. So that's super important. You're keeping intact the integrity of the contract for J1 without removing anything. So you can reimburse for termite. You can reimburse for association or condominium documents as well. Same thing. Buyer reimburse seller for condominium documents upon successful closing. So when you add all these things up, termite, condo docs, survey, you could end up saving them at least a couple $1,000s, which puts you ahead. If you're submitting an offer, I would write that into your introductory email when you submit that offer, like, hey, these are all the things that we're willing to do. The last thing that I would kind of use case by case, certainly talk to your BIC about it first, is you can certainly give a small credit from your commission to the seller as well, because that's impacting their pocketbook. But I wouldn't just jump at that. I would use that on a case by case basis as well. I don't know if that helps answer your question, Udi. So this is something that Tony and I kind of deal with relatively often. The big signature on the bottom of page 14 and on the counter on page 2 is for rejections only. It's not for accepted offers. And it's not something we're making up. It's part of HER, as it says there, 1699-3. It's very clear. In fact, I have it here as to what that specific area states, but it is for rejected offers. There are some, in fact, I don't want to mention the names, but Tony and I were dealing with a couple of agents who said the offer is not considered fully executed unless the broker signs that. The brokers are not party to the contract. If the buyer and seller are party to the contract, if the buyer and seller have fully executed this legal binding document, an agent who tries to stop that from happening can actually get it. That's an ethical violation. So it is absolutely not going to stop escrow from opening. And in fact, while this is our own firm's policy, another firm, an outside agency, could in fact say that our firm's policy is to sign it upon acceptance. That's okay. That's not illegal, but they can't force their firm standards on us, just like we can't force our firm standards on them. So we don't sign that unless it's been rejected. So some of you have sent me, DocuSigns having that area for me to initial, and I've written back to you, it is rejection or acceptance. If it's rejection, I'm not signing it. If it's rejection, I'm signing it. If it's an acceptance, I'm not signing it whatsoever. So just know that. Another tidbit before I move on, and Tony, do you want to add anything to this part, by the way?
The rejection part? No.
Yeah.
I did want to add something with regards to, special terms.
Okay.
You touched on that only the buyers and sellers are, parties to the contracts. And every now and then I see a contract in there that the lender will pay for something or the buyer's agent will pay for something. The thing is you need to follow up with that in writing in a separate agreement, because push comes to shove, if the lender has agreed to something today, he's not signing a contract. He can't be held to it unless there's another agreement in writing between the lender and whoever he's giving credits to.
Awesome. Thank you for that. One other thing too is Tony and I BIC for a lot of different people. We have a good handful of BICs, very well qualified BICs here at KW. We try our best to get you signed and reviewed as quickly as possible. If you send stuff to us via DocuSign, just to make sure we're clear, we can review it if we're at a computer. But DocuSign is a great, secure digital platform, so we can sign securely and all parties are sent CC'd on and what have you, which is great. However, DocuSign doesn't allow us to tip it over to do landscape, to kind of zoom in. It takes a long time to, it's not a good reviewing platform. So if you send us something and you need it reviewed right away, text us and send it to me via PDF, because in that way I can actually look through that entire document quickly and then say, yeah, you're good to go, send it to me via DocuSign, and I can sign it as quickly as possible. But just know, if you send it via DocuSign first, there will be a delay unless I'm sitting in front of a computer or Tony's sitting in front of a computer or what have you. So we want to review things quickly, but there's a little bit of limitation on some of those applications as well.
And also, Chad, and jumping in on that for a second, if you submit a great contract, it's easy to review it, in a PDF on a phone. If you've got a contract with numerous, revisions, it's hard to do that on a phone, because I've got to go and get out of my PDF, and I've got to type it up in a message, then I got to send it, then I got to pull the PDF back and redo it. It's just like, so when you say something, you want something in 5 minutes, That's great if it's a good contract, well written, doesn't need any changes. But otherwise, you're gonna have to wait till I get to a computer or one of the other bigs to do the same thing. And a lot of times, we used to be able to just go ahead on an iPhone or an iPad and just circle what needed to be changed. But you know, Adobe came out and said that unless you need a password, you need a password to write on the documents. We don't have that ability any longer. So, just be aware of that. If you need something right away, just make it a good contract and give us a heads up. And if I'm not by a computer, I'm going to tell you that.
Yeah, and that's a great point. At the end of the day, we have a BIC at any firm, not only KW, so those that are with other firms that are joining us, we have the duty of supervision. I mean, it's required by law. So we can't take things lightly. We can't just assume that you wrote everything well. We have to make sure, because our license is in jeopardy, as well as yours, as well as the firms. It's a serious thing. So we just want to make sure that we have the time to be able to review it properly. So great point. And to all that, we're kind of getting closer to ending, but this is my favorite part of the slide. If you guys keep doing the same things that we've told you, don't do this. Here's a fun video that will illustrate that further. Or not.
Yes, again, I'm just washing my hands.
I'm Catherine Bigman. Janet Carlisle referred me.
Oh, yes. Still being buried alive in a box.
Yes, that's me. Should I lay down?
Oh, no, we don't do that anymore. Just have a seat. And let me tell you a bit about our billing. I charge $5 for the first 5 minutes. And then absolutely nothing after that. How does that sound?
That sounds great. Too good to be true, as a matter of fact.
Well, I can almost guarantee you that our session won't last the full 5 minutes. Now, we don't do any insurance billing, so you would either have to pay in cash or by check.
Wow. Okay.
And I don't make change.
All right.
And go.
Go.
Well, tell
What?
me about the problem that you wish to address.
Oh, okay. Well, I have this fear of being buried alive in a box. I start thinking about being buried alive and I begin to panic.
Has anyone ever tried to bury you alive in a box?
No, but truly thinking about it does make my life horrible. I mean, I can't go through tunnels or be in an elevator or in a house, anything boxy.
So what you're saying is you're claustrophobic.
Yes, that's it.
All right, well, let's go, Catherine. I'm going to say 2 words to you right now. I want you to listen to them very, very carefully. Then I want you to take them out of the office with you and incorporate them into your life.
Well, shall I write them down?
Well, if it makes you comfortable, it's just 2 words. We find most people can remember them.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay, here they are. Stop it!
I'm sorry?
Stop it!
Stop it?
Yes, STOP, new word, IT.
So what are you saying?
It's funny. I say 2 simple words, and I cannot tell you the amount of people who say exactly the same thing you're saying. I mean, this is not Yiddish, Catherine. This is English. Stop it.
So I should just stop it.
There you go. I mean, you don't want to go through life being scared of being buried alive in a box, do you? I mean, that sounds frightening.
It is.
Then stop it.
I can't. I mean, it's been with me since childhood.
No, we don't go there. Just stop.
So I should just stop being afraid of being buried alive in a box.
You got it. Good girl. Well, it's only been 3 minutes, so that will be $3.
Actually, I only have a 5, so
Well, I don't make change.
then I guess I'll take the full 5 minutes.
Fine. All right. Well, what other problems would you like to address?
Whew. I'm bulimic. I stick my fingers down my throat.
Stop it! Nut of some kind? Don't do that.
But I'm compelled to. My mom used to call me fatty.
No, we don't go there.
But I've been having this dream.
No, we don't go there either.
But my horoscope did say.
We definitely don't go there. Just stop it. What else?
Well, I have self-destructive relationships with men.
Stop it! You want to be with a man, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, then stop it. Don't be such a big baby.
I wash my hands a lot.
That's all right.
It is?
I wash my hands all the time. There's a lot of germs out there. Yeah, don't worry about that.
I'm afraid to drive.
Well, stop it. How are you? What's the problem, Kathy?
I don't like this. I don't like this therapy at all. You're just telling me to stop it.
And you don't like that.
No, I don't.
So you think we're moving too fast? Is that it?
Yes. Yes, I do.
All right, then let me give you 10 words that I think will clear everything up for you. You want to get a pad and a pencil for this one?
Right.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right, here are the 10 words. Stop it or I'll bury you alive in a box.
So, it's a funny little video, but it's to say, listen, if you're doing kind of your usual thing, you have full control over that. So change it, change the way you're looking at things. Will help you understand the purchase contract and some different strategies a little bit better. I had an agent that just texted me on the side, asked what a good appraisal clause or language is. Some of that stuff we already have written. I'll put a separate video out on that. We have that written, and it's in zip forms under clauses and global clauses, and it's in that escalation clause is in there. So a couple of other things are in there. We'll make sure that we show a video on where to find that and how to find that. That's specifically for KW agents, just so you know. So real quick, as we wrap things up, how to stay out of trouble. Make sure that you are licensed if you're doing real estate activities. This also goes for your assistants, your TCs, your TMs. They can do things for you, but if they're doing anything that requires a license, you are now aiding and abetting, and there are absolute penalties for that. So make sure that you understand that. Can an unlicensed assistant host an open house? Nope. They can help with an open house, but they cannot host an open house. Can an unlicensed assistant answer incoming calls for you? Sure. That's a personal assistant. The moment that conversation starts to go into real estate, you're getting into a slippery slope. So be very, very, very cautious. Can an unlicensed assistant write a purchase contract for you? Absolutely not. Never, ever, ever. Stay in your lane. If you're not proficient in a certain area of real estate, don't do that. Stop it. So for instance, one that came up the other day that Jen, our new PB, and I were speaking about is creating some resources for people who, like for instance, short sales or distressed properties, having an ability to be able to use different services as a result of that. So if you've never done a short sale before, don't learn on the job. If you've never done a probate sale, don't learn on the job. Make sure that you partner up. There's so many unbelievable agents at KW. Partner up with somebody who has. and then you can learn from them. And we have a mentorship and coaching program exclusively for that. So make sure that you lean into that resource. Write it down. Just like a physician or attorney, licensed real estate agent should be taking notes. During a buyer consult, which is, in my opinion, really, really important, and a listing appointment, write it down. And also follow things up. This is coming from Kimo Stone, as all of you guys know, most of you guys know who Kimo is. He's an attorney that teaches a lot of classes for us. If a client has given you instruction for something, such as, yeah, I'm good with the findings of the J1 report and the home inspection, we can move past it and I'll satisfy that. Per our conversation today, I wanted to confirm that you gave me instruction to satisfy a J1. Like, everything should be in writing so that if it comes back to you, we already have it documented. Don't use templates. I mentioned that before. If you're ever audited and all the contracts that you've written have exactly the same amount of days and language, I don't know how that would justify satisfying your client's goals and priorities if all of them are the same. It's not easy to create a contract if you know what everything means. Don't copy things from other MLS listings. Whether you're the buy side or a list side, I see agents do this all the time. They'll go in and put in information that they got from an MLS listing, but the MLS is garbage in, garbage out. So if that agent who put it in had inaccurate information, now you have inaccurate information. It's very easy to get this information you need. So just confirm it by doing some research on your own. Do a buyer consultation. Don't skip the buyer consult. It doesn't matter if the buyer has purchased many homes in the past. You've heard that before. I purchased 10 homes. I know what I'm doing. Or as a friend or family member especially, or as a licensed agent themselves, do the consultation. Not only are you setting the tone for because the consultation is not only telling them what the market of the moment is and telling them what the landscape of the current market is, you're also giving them the expectations on how you're going to conduct business with them. So it could be things like, I don't work past a certain hour. After 9 p.m., I turn my phone off. That's a great thing to bring up during the buyer consultation. Also, Mr. Buyer, do you mind if I text you or email you? Do you prefer a phone call instead? All these different things shouldn't be assumed. Those are the kind of dialogue that you should have in the buyer consultation, along with the market of the moment and how you're going to add value and how you're going to find them the right property and so forth. Amendment versus addendum. Tony and I were talking about this yesterday briefly. Tony, you want to allude to some of this?
If you're, changing dates, changing language throughout parts of the contract, it's an amendment. If you're adding a document to it, it's an addendum. So if it looks like it's going to fall under Section D1, it's an addendum. But if you're just going to change something to the contract, F1, F2, F3, J1, it's an amendment to the contract.
Thank you, sir. Countering, for the sake of clarity, when countering, update the date of expiration from the offer received, as well as, and I'll say this because we do have a bunch of agents at KW that are also agents in other states as well. Our counter, California, for instance, they number the counters. So it's like counter 1, and you can counter the counter, and it kind of just keeps going. Whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, in ours, when you create a counter and you counter the counter, it voids the previous counter. So something that you're keeping in, you're going to have to rewrite, and then whatever changes that you want, you can add as well. So just to let you know, the countering is really important. Subject to contingencies. Knowing your client's goals and priorities are paramount on how you structure contracts, be it on the buy side or this side or both. If your client is purchasing a property but needs the proceeds from the sale in order to buy, ensure that you have protected them with the proper contingencies, such as home sale contingency, addendum, and so forth. Anything you want to add to that?
No.
Addendum done prior to acceptance. We have one from Jen. Use only the HR addendum and amendment. This has to be reviewed and approved by Big First. That's our new PB. Thanks, Jen. Closing the windows. Contingencies are like windows for a buyer. You want to have a nice breeze and hope as many are open as possible, but you have the ability to cancel the transaction if necessary. So make sure that as you go through, understand which windows or contingencies are being closed as you proceed through escrow. If you guys have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'm just going to go through a couple more slides because we're all wrapped up. But if you have questions, throw them in the chat. Hey, warm welcome, Jen Andrews. Tony is our outgoing PB. Tony's not going anywhere, fortunately. Tony had helped found KW Honolulu, so he has done such a great job at offering his services as PB up into this point. So thank you so much, Tony. We really appreciate it. Tony is going to be focusing on his own production and always in leadership, so he will continue teaching classes with myself, but we definitely want to give a warm welcome to our new PB, Jen Andrews, who is doing an amazing job. So thank you so much, Jen. We're happy to have you on the team. A couple of things, out front at kw.com, they have some great tips on lead follow-up. Josh Teen, the president of KW, also has some tips in there. There is some new things on the toolkit for command, so please jump in there. Oh, hold on a second now. I'm going to back up for 1 second. So Rustin is an amendment after the contract is accepted. And Jen, they're having comments within our comments. Thanks, Jen. Think Like a CEO. That's Gary Keller's podcast with Jay Papasan. It's an amazing podcast. If you haven't heard it, by all means jump into it. It's really good. You can now set commands in. Awesome. Now set commands, goals in command, COVID update. Gosh, we're so thankful that we have such low numbers. So that's really, really good. And guys, that is it. We are all done. We greatly appreciate all of you guys joining. This is the first time we've done it in this format. We'll see what the feedback is if we're going to continue. I can tell you that we've had a ton of people on in total, and I'm sure that a lot of people will be chiming in as well. So again, thank you guys. We appreciate it. We will send all of you guys the slides so you can have all the dates, the languages per Rustin and Charmaine's request. If there's anything else, don't hesitate to email, and we're here for you guys. So thank you for stopping by and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, guys.